Ladies and gentlemen, you talked already about the European elections and the result. I have 4 daughters. I have 2 ones that went for election, and I dared to ask, and I was surprised to get the answer. It was not left or right. It was not liberal. It was safety. I was very, very surprised myself to listen to my own kids that these youngsters want safety. So something changed. Something changed, and people want to understand, where should we go? What is the next 5 years period in the European Parliament and European Commission about? And I believe it's the end of the rainbow discussion. So it's the end of the discussion about colors. My name is Jorgo Chatzimarkakis. I have the honor and also the pleasure to be a CEO of Hydrogen Europe. My chair is here, so my boss, Sopna Suri, who will be later on here on stage. Sopna, you chased me, but for me it's a pleasure to work for Hydrogen Europe, a pleasure to basically do what I do. It's like a hobby. Netflix, definitely not needed, but I like to watch football also at the moment. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. In German you say, himmelhoch jauchzend zu Tode betrübt, rejoicing to heaven, grieving to death. That's the 2 faces of hydrogen at the moment. So on one hand, we understand that there are no FIDs. There are not that much FIDs that you would expect looking at the projects. On the other hand, I'm confronted with enormous fascination, excitement in geographies like South Africa, like Chile, like Brazil, India. New ministers chasing us. Can we be the host, the partner country of the Hydrogen Week? Hydrogen Week, 18th to 22 November in Brussels. Saudi Arabia. I will talk about that later on because it just kicks off, and you see volume, not NEOM, bigger than NEOM, much bigger than NEOM. So that's the 2 feelings, and I think Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, German poet, described it very, very well. You can have both feelings in yourself, and you can take basically the best out of it, and I believe there are things we need to do. So what's wrong in Europe? And I can speak for Europe. Our big issue is de-risking. That's something that you guys need. You have startups, you need to have a long-term perspective, you need partners, and these partners need exactly that. So, in fact, you could argue, you have these IPCEIs, the important project of common European interest, 44 billion euro all over. But unfortunately, our de-risking strategy in Europe looks like that, like a toolbox, not in order. You don't understand it. What we need is a Swiss knife, a hydrogen bank, and indeed we had the first auction of the hydrogen bank, which was robust, so 132 bids, out of which 90% were eligible. That shows there is a sector, hydrogen price or hydrogen funding scheme, less than 50 cents, less than €0.5 per kilo. It's fantastic. But what we need is, we need to coordinate even better in Europe the use of infrastructure. This is what I would expect from a hydrogen bank, which in fact is not a bank but an agency. I would also expect that we are negotiating better with international partners. I'll come to an example on that. We need production support. That's what the first auction of the hydrogen bank auction of the scheme did. But what is missing is that your customers, your partners, the off-takers, they need to be de-risked. And this is something we need to dive into, we need to understand better. If the price of a renewable fuel of non-biological origin, refinobio, like they call it, would be 1.5% if it's gray at the moment, the cost for a green molecule would be around 6. So the problem is this price that comes on top, the €2 plus €2, that are definitely too much for an off-taker, be it steel, be it chemical company, to take. This is too much of a risk. Our proposal is very, very simple. What we want to do is, we would expect the steel producers to pay this premium of 0.5, maybe it's even less because the price is higher, 1.7, 1.8. So 20 cent up to 50 euro cent, you would expect them to pay as a green premium. But then we need an off-taker support. This off-taker support, call it contract for difference, Klimaverträge in German, is something, it's sunk costs, it's sunk money, but this is what the taxpayer, what the minister needs to give, to de-risk. Still 2 euros to come. For the production in Europe, we here foresee the hydrogen bank and similar schemes by member states. For outside Europe, we have an interesting, not idea, interesting offers. We know producers who say, if you guarantee me a contract for 20 years, I can bring down the cost. I pay, but I can bring down the cost another 2 euro. And this is what I would expect also from the Hydrogen Bank, these negotiations with the international partners. And there are some companies that are doing that, but they want more than 20 years, and I can understand that. So for 10 years they would subsidize themselves, they have deep pockets. The other 10 years they would make profit and they have a long-term perspective. So this is what we call the sharing, to share the price of premium of renewable hydrogen, and this is how it would work. We also need to internalize the external cost. That's an old slogan, still super valid. You see that carbon is still produced, CO2 is still produced worldwide. So the peak is postponed every year. And I don't see any end of it. I don't see any end. Blah, blah, blah. Politicians tell us we cut it down. They don't. So if we don't manage to bring the CO2 price into this equation, we will fail. But it's not hydrogen that fails. It's us, humanity. It's us. I told you about 4 daughters. 4 daughters. We will fail. I don't want my 4 daughters to suffer from that. Well, we have an ETS system. You can see here that only 23% of the world have an ETS scheme, have an internalization of the CO2 costs, out of which China is the biggest chunk. But here you see how high the price is. It's very, very low when you see China. China is the little thing down there. So it's irrelevant. It is ETS, but it's irrelevant. It does not price carbon. And as long as we as EU are dancers alone, it will not really work. So we need to convince others to also understand this logic, and I think we can do it. But it's unfair to expect from hydrogen being on par with fossil if you still subsidize fossil. That's what governments do. They subsidize fossil energy, and then they come to us and say, why are you not bankable? Because you politicians give your money to the fossil production. Stop it. Deviate it. Bring it to another thing. That's what we need to do. Then we need simplification. Who on earth invented the hourly correlation? Why are there people out there telling us this is very, very important? It is not. It can be important one day. At the moment, it's important to bring the investments into this direction. What we did as Europeans, we put on the straitjacket. I have every week Canada, Egypt, Morocco, Australia, people from governments coming to us. The best were the Indians. They asked us all the questions, and then they say, but you are shooting yourself not in your foot, in your head. Yes, we are doing that. We need to get rid of complicated artificial rules that are imposed by people who don't like hydrogen. They don't want hydrogen. They want to concentrate on possibly green electrons. Fine. I will show that it's not enough. And this is what we need to change. Unnecessary legislation needs to be abolished. We also need to implement targets. We managed in Europe to have targets for fueling stations. This is obligatory, by the way, until 2030, 600 refueling stations. need to be built. Most of them will be in the truck sector, and we see announcements not every week, but every fortnight about big truck producers looking into that, not only on fuel cells, also on internal combustion engine, combustion for hydrogen, very interesting. And if we put together all the targets, the fueling stations, but also the obligations in the mobility sector, in the industry sector, and the starting of obligations in aviation and in maritime, we achieve some million tons per year as of 2030 on an obligatory basis, which is a good start. But I'm very honest here. This obligation needs to be implemented into national law. AFIR, so the fueling stations, are already national law. That's a regulation, so it's already there. The directives, the renewable energy directives, where the other tons come from, need to be implemented by member states. And we hear that companies, big steel companies, big chemical companies, tell their governments, don't implement. If you implement, I go to China, because I cannot pay the €6, so the €4 on top. If you don't help me, I don't do that. And that is why we say you can oblige your company, but you need to do two things. One, infrastructure. You need to provide the infrastructure to bring this renewable fuels of non-biological origin there. And second, you need to de-risk, and I showed how this can work. How do you visualize green bonds? That's what we need. We need to crowd in private investment, and all these activities that we can see in parts of the world that have deeper pockets, they hope and they work with these instruments. What we are missing in the European Union is a proper credit market union. And despite the fact that Mrs. von der Leyen has not been appointed yesterday evening, it's a question of time. I can understand the background. It doesn't matter. She will most probably be the next Commission President, and she believes in exactly that. She talks to Madame Lagarde, to the head of the central bank, and it will be a very, very decisive development to allow green bonds. I leave it there at the moment. Now let's talk about something very sensitive and very important. Because I'm fed up to listen to people who tell me you're inefficient. Fed up. Because they only look at an inefficiency, so to say, in the energy sector. We need to look at the overall system. Allow me, in this country, in Germany, to quote figures from Germany. Because in Germany we have already a law, that's the Kernnetz, that foresees 10,000 kilometers, 20 billion investment. 10,000 kilometers of hydrogen pipelines, 20 billion. So if we look at the side here where we see the electricity costs, and that's the real problem of the electricity world. It's the dramatical high amount of cost. We see that the congestion management and the curtailment in 2023 was 10.9 billion, so 11 billion. It's not me saying that, it's the German Court of Auditors. They did this calculation and say, whoa, it's good that we have 40% of renewable energy in power production, super. For a country like Germany, it's very, very high. But that's the flip side. The flip side is the very high cost in 1 year, 11 billion. Is that efficient? It's not. So we ask the guy who runs many of these grids, Mr. Birnbaum from E.ON, located here in Essen, how much would it cost to ramp up the grid to avoid these costs? He said, the lowest price tag is 230 billion. See the difference? 230 billion, 20 billion. It's quite a difference. And this is what we need to talk. And this is what young people, when they don't vote green anymore, don't get me wrong, my wife has been elected again, European Parliament. She was in the Green Group. So I understand all this, but people are afraid of this. They were not told that the price tag is so high. They were not told that their jobs are in danger. Last year, Didn't put that price tag here. The electricity price for industry in Germany went up 80%. This is why you can see everyday jobs disappearing here in this country. And this is dangerous, and people feel that, people understand that. So stop kicking hydrogen down. It will kill yourself. Mr. Birnbaum himself from E.ON, he is the boss of Euroelectric. That's to say the counterpart. So Sopner is the hydrogen boss in Europe, and Mr. Birnbaum is the boss of electricity. He said, no renewables anymore, please. I cannot cope with the costs. And I can see, doing surveys, that people don't like these costs to risk their future lives. And this is also something I would like to say. If people talk this hydrogen down, they will possibly in the end see that it comes back anyway. It will be there because it is needed to do different things. First, I start with this side here. There are renewable energy goals. We will have much more renewable energies. What we need is flexibility. Every electricity producer talks about flexibility. Flexibility. What is it? What is flexibility? Flexibility is if you have the possibility to balance out the grid, so you need storage capacity, and you possibly also need a means, a tool to transport the electricity or the renewable energy cheaper. And storage and cheap transport, this is something hydrogen can and will do. So this is one part of the job that needs to be done. The other part is, and you saw the CO2 emissions, are we really believing that tomorrow, without grid, there will be so many renewables that will help us have zero emission? Of course not. We will have molecules in this world. And these molecules need to be decarbonized. You can do it. The IPCC, the climate specialists, talk about these technologies for many, many years. It has been dismissed. No, we need to go renewables. Yes, we will go renewables. But we have this problem. So you need hydrogen here, and you will need hydrogen there. So hydrogen is the key enabler to all the big questions that do scare and frighten our youth. Otherwise, they wouldn't have voted as they did. And our question is how to measure this and how to enhance investment opportunities. And this is exactly what Hydrogen Europe does. We want to find, and here, by the way, I'm looking for startups to be creative in exactly that field, to measure, to make it measurable, and also a very, very important field of investment. And that's what I call the end of the rainbow. It's the time where we need not only to look for time to market, but also for time to decarbonization. We need to be faster. Last week, my friends in Athens called me and said, kids don't go to school because it's 41 degrees already in June. Too early. I saw the election campaign in India. 50 point some degrees. Modi campaigning there in nature. So this is scary. Huh? And time to decarbonization is real. So don't talk hydrogen down wherever and whoever you are, because it doesn't work. Also, the technology, if it works for people, if they're paid for talking it down, it's also a nice business model, but it's not good for humanity. It's not good for humankind. That's the point. Technology diversity is the key. I don't care how this part of the equation is done. I don't care. In some countries, it's nuclear. People like that. In Germany, they don't like it. So be it. There are other technologies. Pyrolysis. Also CCS. It's technologies that help us getting CO2 out of the atmosphere. And that's so important, and that's why we need to do it. Let me finish with that. The European hydrogen economy. I didn't want to show Frankenstein, but basically we are like a big body that is there. We have the regulation, we have everything. What we are missing at the moment is the heartbeat. NEOM I think, was mentioned during that day already several times. 18th of September, 4 times NEOM until 2030 will be announced. It's not here, it's not in Europe, it's in Riyadh. It's basically the green spin-off of Aramco. Aramco in the future will do every other color, but the green color will be dealt with by this new company. And this new company will build up, and they have already the plans, 8 to 10 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity until 2030. Why am I saying that? And now I'm very clear, because the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa region, has the right capacity. So the geography is very good for hydrogen production. And what we see in countries like Emirates, Oman, and Saudi, they also pay the technology. I'm very honest here to you. I want electrolyzers that are produced in Europe to be bought from Europe and to be sold to these geographies. Not so easy with China, not so easy with India. India is interested in doing joint ventures. Nice, but a little bit more dangerous for Europeans. So that's why I put this slide here. We need this heartbeat to start. It's a twofold heartbeat. On one hand, we get the hydrogen that we need, and that's absolutely for sure because I've seen the plans. And secondly, we also become competitive when it comes to clean tech, when it comes to especially electrolyzers, where we didn't surrender like we did in solar panels, like we did in batteries, like we somehow did in wind. And we should not surrender. We are a good continent with smart people that can produce and that can play a role in all this. The end of the rainbow is very real. The next Commission will not deal with ideologies anymore. There are many reasons for that, and maybe it's a good cut in order to understand that Green Deal needs to be continued, don't stop, but needs to be competitive. Thank you very much.